And welcome back to another episode of Locked On Chiefs. My name is Chris Clark. I have with me Nathan Cooper from Sys Analytics. We will talk to him in just a moment. Thank you for listening. We have a lot to talk about today, including Sys Analytics and getting to the draft, what the Chiefs need, what they see the Chiefs need, and maybe where the Chiefs can go in the draft right when we get back on Locked On.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Thank you for always making Locked On Chiefs your first listen of the day. Don't forget we're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube as well. Go like, subscribe, and send us some comments in YouTube. We really do appreciate that, as well as iTunes and on Spotify. I am your host, Chris Clark. You can find me at Chiefs Corner on Twitter. I founded Chiefs Corner and really going to get into statistics and analytics on Chiefs Corner coming up with all the draft analysis that we're going to be doing and also talking about Chiefs cap space and how that applies. But today we're going to talk more about analytics and statistics. And as you can see with me, I have Nathan Cooper from Sys Analytics. Nathan, how's it going?
Doing pretty well, Chris. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, looking forward to talking to you. So tell us a little bit about what you do and what Sys Analytics is.
Yeah, Sports Info Solutions is actually a data and analytics company, like you mentioned. We started as a baseball company all the way back in 2002. So if you're familiar with Moneyball, that's kind of when we started. Started the football side of the company in 2015 and actually started doing basketball this last year. So really jumping in on a lot of different sports here. But while we're mainly, data collection company, we started adding in, scouting and betting and different things like that as well to the departments. And on the football side, track hundreds of data points every single play, and on the football side for NFL and every FBS college football game. So a lot of stuff goes into it, and obviously now with the draft, we're gearing up on the scouting side. We've been doing the SIS Football Rookie Handbook for the last 3 years, and finally decided to get with the times a little bit and move it all online. So that's what we're talking about a little bit today. NFLdraft.sportsinfosolutions.com is the draft site. 400 plus scouting reports, top 101 big board, positional rankings, leaderboards, NFL team pages, a little bit of anything and everything for everybody.
Sounds like you have a lot of it covered. And when you start looking at the analytics, you talked about starting in the baseball world, and obviously that's a completely different realm. But you start getting into Moneyball and what that meant in the baseball world, and now you're looking at football and you're looking at sports and analytics and statistics. How have you seen this evolve over time over the last couple of years?
Yeah, football has really taken to analytics over the last few years. Obviously with a lot of the fourth down conversion rates, the punting rates, the passing over rushing type of stuff. Obviously, there's been a lot of things. And I mean, you can look at different teams like the Browns trying to gather a bunch of analytics front office people, the Eagles doing a lot of fourth down stuff and getting that started a few years ago. I think it's really been a big and interesting trend, sort of adopting kind of what baseball has done, over the past 20 years and really taking it to the football side. And, every year we always say, every year is a little bit bigger and better than the last year. And, as a company and on the analytics side for football, I really think that's true as well.
Yeah, and you start looking at what that's going to mean for football. And obviously we're going to focus on the NFL draft here when we come back from break here in a minute. But, you start looking at how this is going to change the game of football and how people are looking at draft picks differently. What has really stood out to you over the past couple of years as you've gotten more and more into the NFL draft?
Yeah, I mean, obviously with the draft, I've always loved the draft. It's the first
it's a great
thing
time, isn't it?
It's so much fun, for the last 20, 30 years. That's the one thing that I focus on. That's my holiday. So it's definitely a lot of fun. And I mean, you have so many different, analytics companies and people trying to, I think, improve and revamp the trade value chart, I think is one of the big things. And we actually just put an article out a couple of weeks ago, kind of trying to do the same thing as well. Obviously, everyone knows about the Jimmy Johnson chart from 30 years ago or so now. And I think a lot of NFL people still do use that, but I think when you look at what actually has happened in the draft, I think it warrants a little bit of change and rebuild, I guess. So I think that's an interesting part, trying to see how some of these trades have actually, come out, later down the road, obviously. So it's sort of looking at the analytics and the stats behind these trades and what's actually come out of it, instead of just looking at the chart and trying to value what pick is what, actually getting in the, to the in-depth parts of the stats and the analytics behind it.
Yeah, and the thing that I really find interesting, I did actually read that article a couple of weeks ago when you brought that out. It's always interesting to see how different teams value picks. Kansas City made a huge trade with Tyreek Hill, and you kind of see how that played out on some different models, and to kind of get an idea as to how they value that trade versus other ways. It's just interesting. So when we get back, we're going to talk a lot more about the Chiefs' needs, where you guys see the Chiefs needing help this season, and we're going to talk about the Chiefs draft in the section after that. But before we get there, I want to tell you about our friends over at Blue Nile. Whether she prefers a statement piece or everyday subtle elegance, BlueNile.com has fine jewelry options for every mom. Shop high-quality classic diamond earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, or gemstone pendant necklaces. If you're looking for fine jewelry but having trouble choosing, Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7. They're available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Mark Mother's Day with something enduring, classic diamond stud earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, birthstone pendants, and so much more on BlueNile.com. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off 500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day. Use code Locked On. That's code Locked On. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. All right, Nathan, so let's go ahead and jump into this and start talking a little bit more about what the Chiefs actually need, or what you guys are seeing that Kansas City needs going into the season.
Yeah, so our proprietary player value metric is total points. Essentially, telling you how many points a player is worth, based on all the data that we collect. And one of the really cool features of our new site is on the team pages, we have something called SIS Sonar. This essentially takes the depth chart and adds in a total points per game aspect to basically assess where the starter is at that position in one of 5 tiers based on the rest of the league. So it's really cool. You have, a top percentage, a bottom percentage, and, a couple of spots in between there. So you can kind of get an idea of, sort of like a heat map of, what's good and what you may need for the, throughout the rest of the roster. And based on that, obviously it's not a perfect science or anything, still working on it. But we're feeling, not in any order, receiver, right tackle, defensive tackle, edge, corner, and safety are all, prime spots that we can go to. And if you're asking me, which I think a lot of Chiefs fans would also agree, receiver, edge, and corner are probably the 3 go-to positions.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting you talk about this specific metric. And I remember looking at this specifically. It does kind of have a heat map based on the number, right? Because the colors, it's color-coded as well.
Yes. Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form.
Yep. Yeah. Color coded for sure. It kind of gives you, it's visually appealing. You can click, and it's interactive. You can actually click on it. And it shows you the starter, shows you the total points per game. It gives you the rest of the depth chart behind them as well. And yeah, it looks, you can see obviously for Kansas City, they're pretty good at quarterback, tight end, and most of the line. And you can obviously see that based on the sonar.
Yeah, and when you start looking at the different positions, obviously, like you said, quarterback, tight end, those are the ones that are going to stick out on offense. Defensive tackle is a little interesting to me. Chris Jones, I think plays pretty well, but obviously depth there is going to be a question. And how do your analytics look at it? Are you looking, when you're talking total points, how do you look into a situation where, pass rush versus run stopping? Obviously, that's going to play into how those are graded, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's taking every metric that we're collecting, on a play-by-play basis, but obviously, passing is what is going to gain you more points.
Right.
You look at EPA, you look at total points, you look at anything, it's going to tell you, obviously you should probably pass over run, which is why we get into all these other things about the running backs and things like that. But yeah, obviously, whenever you're looking at passing, quarterbacks are going to, by far and away, they're going to lead in total points, for almost every single team. They're the most valuable position, and that makes sense. So we have it geared towards that. Obviously, tight ends, your receivers, they're going to gain a lot of points if they're productive in the passing game. So you're looking at running backs. A top running back is going to be probably a third of the total points of some of these other positions, just because that's based on the strength of the NFL game.
Right. And now when you start looking at some of these statistics and you start looking at what Kansas City needs, they brought in 2 receivers that last year didn't do near as much as I expect that they probably could do in Kansas City. Is there a way that plays into what you're looking at analysis-wise?
Yeah, and like I said, the sonar, it's still being developed, and you look
Right.
at it right now. It may show you like, hey, this guy's bottom tier when he was a rookie last year, or maybe he's a bottom tier like Juju Smith-Schuster didn't play really at all last year. It has him bottom tier.
Well, and Ben Roethlisberger is his QB. I mean, good luck.
Correct, exactly. So just little things like that. But whenever you're looking at it as a whole, you're looking at the depth and everything. You just kind of have to take it with a grain of salt and kind of see like, oh yeah, this guy was a rookie last year. Maybe he only played in 5 or 6 games. It's understandable why his total points per game isn't very high. And you're looking to upgrade what you have regardless of the position anyway. That's what the draft is all about. And if it looks like you're the back end of the depth of one of your positions needs some help, then that's what you look for.
And you're also looking at, specifically when you're talking about points, you're looking at this is how the players performed in the past. It's not necessarily indicative of what's going to happen in the future. When you move a guy from like MBS or from not MBS isn't the best example. Juju's probably the better example.
Mm-hmm.
Moving from a scenario where he's not used a lot, even the year before 2020, in 2020 when Ben was still in decline, you're going to have a much better situation with Patrick Mahomes. That's going to be something you're going to have to kind of just say, okay, well, this data point isn't going to fit this, but it's because of this. So you have to use it as a metric to kind of look at everything else.
Exactly. And yeah, like, again, this website we just got up a couple weeks ago, it has, bits and pieces, but that's just one aspect of it. You look through the rest of the team page, gives you tons of other data that you can look at. And obviously what we do here, we collect a lot of different stats and analytics. So you can go look at other, other aspects of, Juju's stats in certain scenarios or things like that to really pull those other, aspects of his game.
And when we start talking about the draft, which we will here in just a minute, I want to talk about obviously wide receiver, which will be a big topic. Edge and corner also will. But the one that stood out to me that I don't think enough people talk about is the right tackle. What is it that really you're seeing there when you're looking at what you see in your statistics?
Yeah, right now, obviously we have Lucas Niang as the starter there, 1.5 total points per game. Whenever you compare him to a guy like Orlando Brown, 2.1, he's going to fare a little bit better. We have Niang as that bottom to mid-tier player right now. And obviously the injuries, he didn't play a ton. You had a lot of rotation at the right tackle position as well. Maybe trying to find someone that maybe can come in and be a little bit more stable. But I mean, the one good thing about, the Chiefs offensive line is depth. They had guys go down and they had guys who could come in and replace them. So that's one position on a football team you can never have too much of, is the offensive line position.
Yeah, and I like what you said, though. Orlando Brown is a 2.1, Lucas Niang is a 1.5, and that doesn't seem like a huge difference in things, but it really is when you're talking about points added, especially for offensive line, because those guys aren't going to be adding a lot of points. What are you looking at for like Joe Thuney and Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith?
Yeah, Humphrey was, probably one of the best rookies last year, especially on the offensive line, 1.9 total points per game.
Yeah.
And you look at the whole left side. That's top tier. You're looking at him, Thuney, 2.7, another top tier guy. And then you even look at Trey Smith at 1.9 at the right guard position, mid to top tier guy there. So definitely strong along most of the offensive line. Definitely 2 good hits with Humphrey and Smith last year for sure. But yeah, for the most part, the offensive line looks like it's in pretty good shape. But, for us, I think the right tackle position could use an upgrade or at least a little bit more depth there to come in and compete.
No, absolutely. And really what you're looking at, again, like I said, is really 1.5 sounds okay compared to 2.1. But that's when you're talking about this type of statistic and you're looking at offensive line play, they're not going to add a ton of points. So that is a huge difference in the amount of points that they can add to the game. So I think that's a good thing to see. When we get back, I do want to talk more about this draft and where you see Kansas City really focusing when it comes to, you talked about wide receiver and edge and probably CB as well. But before we get there, I want to tell you about our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all betting stats and sports info. Find all of your latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sport wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Nathan, now let's dive into where we both have the most fun, the NFL draft.
Let's do it.
I absolutely love this time of year. This is probably one of my favorite times of year other than watching football games. So what do you see from Kansas City? And I guess my big question is, when you look at past drafts, what kind of point totals are you looking at the different positions? Because I would imagine wide receiver and edge are probably going to affect the game more. And obviously wide receiver is going to affect it more than an edge probably will.
Yeah, absolutely. You're looking at, obviously, whenever you're talking those positions, like I said earlier, passing is the big thing in the league. That's what's going to gain you the most total points, and the most points throughout games for the most part. So receiver, basically, you're looking at how can we create points on the offensive side, and how can you stop points on the offensive side. So you're looking at quarterback, receiver, edge rushers, and corner. Those, looking on both sides of the ball there. So obviously that's where you're going to gain a lot of the total points from that metric. And, those are the sort of the positions that you want to covet for the most part. I will say receiver, we say this all the time in-house here, receiver for the most part is a dime a dozen. Aside from those top tier guys, those top 4 or 5 guys, maybe in a given draft. Beyond that, like maybe a draft will have a little bit of depth to it, maybe it won't. But beyond that, you have a lot of dime a dozen type of players. So finding a big time player like a Tyreek Hill or something like that, it's tough to find. And then being able to fill out the rest of the receiver room, you can find those guys for the most part throughout the draft. We have 50 some players at receiver on our website right now, and a lot of guys are similar grades beyond those top 5, 6, 7 guys that can kind of fill in wherever.
Yeah, and you're looking at, and the key there is Kansas City's picking at 29 and 30. If they stay where they are, most of those 5 guys are probably all going to be gone. I would imagine maybe even all of them are gone, and maybe even down to 7 or 8. It really just depends on how the draft shakes out with all the different positions. But then you look at the value of the guys that are after them. You're talking a point total difference of a couple, or are you talking, in your different tiers?
Yeah. You probably are going to fall off just a little bit. Whenever, again, another thing that you can definitely check out with the site is all the leaderboards. And if you go to receiver, you can see all the total points per game setting up here. Garrett Wilson, by number 1 here. Sky Moore is a guy who's been talked about sort of in that late first round range at number 2. Can you
give the website one more time just so we have it right now?
Yeah, absolutely. NFLdraft.sportsinfosolutions.com.
Thanks.
It's great to use for the stuff that we're just talking about right now. All these things that the leaderboards you can look for: total points per game, total EPA per game, total touchdowns per game, tons of leaderboards that you want to look for. But yeah, you're looking at those types of guys. You have a guy, Jahan Dotson, maybe a guy that can maybe slip down a little bit, but maybe more that mid-tier first round guy, 3.6 tied for 3rd. And then you're kind of working your way down. But from the top all the way to the bottom, you're looking at like maybe a 4 total points per game type of player, maybe down to like a 1.5. So there's a big drop off whenever you're looking at, those guys in the first round to those guys in the 4th or 5th round. But, there's so many guys at this position that anywhere between the 3rd and the 7th round, that's why you hit on so many of these guys late in the draft.
So when we switch it over to the edge position, what are you really looking at there? Because I know that there's, a lot of people will say there's, 4 edges in this class that are probably top tier. Some would say maybe 5 or 6.
Yeah, I believe we have 7 or 8 guys with, guys with solid starting grades. But if you're looking for the top tier, probably about 4 or 5. Yep. But yeah, edge is probably one of the deeper classes, especially at the top and even throughout the draft. Obviously Hutchinson and Thibodeau are those top guys. Walker is even in the discussion. But you get beyond that, a guy like George Karlaftis from Purdue, Jermaine Johnson from Florida State. We have Myjai Sanders probably a little bit higher than some other places. He's our number 6 guy. But then Kingsley Enagbare from South Carolina, and then you even drop to like an Ojabo or a Mafe type of players as well. So a lot of really good potential, a lot of raw athleticism in this edge class as well.
And really quick, because you bring up Ojabo, is that something that you take into your metrics when he's not going to play the first part of the season, or are you basing it? It's all on historical value, right?
Yeah, for the most part, when we do our grading, we're grading on the field. So we're grading strictly what we see on the film. Obviously, we have a lot of the metrics that factor in. So basically, us ranking him at number 43 overall and us ranking him at a 6'6" has nothing to account for his injury, nothing to
Right.
account for any of that. This is strictly what he's going to be on the field. But yeah, you're looking at a guy like this who, he's a red shirt essentially coming out. He's a
Right.
1 year production type of guy. So there's a lot that you have to weigh in. But you just watch him on the film. The raw athleticism is ridiculous, and I think it would, to me, it would be wise maybe to take him in a spot where the Chiefs are at, just because you're going to redshirt him, and if you take him in the first round, you get that 5th-year option with him too. So definitely something that I think a lot of teams are going to consider at the back end of the first round.
Yeah, I definitely think that's something to look at when you talk about 5th-year option. Usually you're talking about QBs, but in this scenario, you could be talking about an edge that has potential to, some people would argue he could be a top 15 pick. Just depends on who you look at and how you value edge rushers. But I do think that that's very interesting. Now, when you start looking over at the cornerback position, how many are you seeing really in that area?
Yeah, we actually have a good amount of corners as well. Corner and edge are probably two of the deeper positions for us that we're seeing. Obviously, you have certain guys like a Sauce Gardner at the top. You have a Stingley at the top as well. We actually have them with the same grade. We have Stingley a little bit higher. But I'm really high on Trent McDuffie out of Washington. I know they have Kyler Gordon as well. So 2 guys coming out of there. And Andrew Booth, a Kobe Bryant, a Cam Taylor-Britt. A lot of these guys that we have, as being solid starters. And I didn't even mention Kaiir Elam out of Florida as well. So a lot of these guys, you could get a couple of these guys in that top 10. I think you may see a run in the middle of the first round. And I think you're going to see some guys even go late first and early second as well.
Yeah, and you start looking at those positions, and all those positions are positions that Kansas City needs: wide receiver, edge, and corner. And what it sounds like you're saying is, besides those top 5 wide receivers, you're probably better off waiting until maybe the 3rd round to take a guy, because between round 2 and round 3 is going to be about the same. And maybe you go get a wide receiver. If you can't get a wide receiver early, you take edge and you take CB, and then you come back and get wide receiver later.
Yeah, I think that would make the most sense to me, because with how deep and how good this edge and corner class is, especially in the first 2 or 3 rounds, I think it makes sense. And I mean, I wouldn't even be against grabbing more than one of those positions throughout the draft as well. But yeah, for me, if those big time receivers are gone, Kansas City has a few picks on day 2 as well. So I think, if you're even wanting to wait till the 3rd round, there's a lot of good talent that you can find, late day 2, even early day 3.
Yeah, you're talking about 8 picks in the top, 100 or 135, I think is what it is. Top 4 rounds, they have 8 picks. So I think that's going to be fun to watch. Thank you very much, Nathan. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed this conversation. Can you tell people more about where they can find you? Obviously, we have your information on Twitter, but this is also on audio as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said before, NFLdraft.sportsinfosolutions.com is our new website, our new draft site. Got that up, like I mentioned, a lot of great stuff on there, tons of scouting reports, tons of rankings, leaderboards, team pages, a lot of fun stuff there to sift through. And we're making changes and updates every day, just like any new website would. Sportsinfosolutions.com. You can see a lot of our info about the company. We're actually are beginning to hire for our football season next year. So you can always check that out. And the company Twitter as well as @sportsinfo_SIS.
Nathan, really appreciate you coming on. It's been a lot of fun. I'm sure you're really looking forward to the draft. I know it's just basically a week away at this point.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Appreciate you having me on, Chris.
Thank you all for listening today. We will be back tomorrow to talk more about the NFL draft and how the Chiefs are going to prepare for this year.